Hello. You all know me, and I'm all about history. I love the history of North Dakota, and especially the old stuff. And I'm here today to talk about the Black Leg Ranch. George Doan would be the first to come back to the United States and homestead the Great Plains of the Dakota Territory. He homesteaded in 1882, which, by the way, is before Medora was founded. And later, he founded the Black Leg Ranch. However, North Dakota wouldn't become a state until 1889. Black Leg Ranch would ultimately decide to go into the cattle business, bringing the first Black Angus cattle into the region. Running a cattle ranch was tough work, but it gave the Doans an honest sense of building a life. 6 generations later, in privately owning over 17,000 acres, the Black Leg Ranch is still owned and operated by the Doan family. The Black Leg Ranch is one of the oldest working ranches, cattle ranches, still in operation today. And this is why I would like to see the Black Leg Ranch inducted into the Cowboy Hall of Fame. If you want to learn more about the Black Leg Ranch, go to on the internet, www.blacklegranch.com, or you can follow them on Facebook.
Good afternoon. So Al and I get to come up and talk right after lunch. That's always tough. I do a lot of producer meetings through my livelihood, and having to speak after a meal is always kind of a chore, so bear with me. I'll keep it short and sweet. I'm honored to get up here today and talk about some friends of ours. The Doan family has been family friends and personal friends for a couple generations now. Many of you know that ranchers traditionally are private people. Frequently they're shy, not as outgoing and open to the world. That can't be said about the Black Leg Ranch and the Doan family. The ranch is, sorry, I had to read some notes here. I wrote for myself, but I can't even read my own handwriting. The ranch is open to everybody. They have constantly having different events, different tours, different things going on there. Whether it's at the event center or whether it's through their different classes or workshops they're hosting. The Black Leg Ranch is the first ranch in North Dakota to win the Aldo Leopold Conservation Award. Very prestigious award. It's also the only ranch in North Dakota to receive the National Environmental Stewardship Award from the NCBA. Both very prominent awards. And that speaks to the ranch, to the family, to what they've done. The Black Leg Ranch prides itself in being a living classroom for producers and others willing to learn and to progress predominantly in the cattle industry. The Black Leg Ranch, and in turn the Doan family, preaches the benefits of holistic management, intensive planned rotational grazing, regenerating natural resources, including wildlife. And the ranch has hosted many soil, health, and grazing tours and workshops over the years. The Black Leg Ranch, as well as the Doan family, as Al kind of mentioned, it's a family ranch. It's a family operation. In one way or another, Jerry and Renee, Jeremy, Jay, Jace, and Shanda are all involved in different aspects of the ranch. They've welcomed youth in to learn more about ranching, to learn more about the Western way of life, but also welcome international visitors through their some of their businesses involved in the tourism aspects of ranching. So they preach everything, and they show a lot of different things going on. The Black Leg Ranch and the family have been involved in youth rodeos, rodeo schools, horsemanship events, and educational events, and lots of different 4-H aspects as well, especially in the Burley County area. The Black Leg Ranch has opened its doors to anybody and everybody that has come around. Jerry goes around and does a lot of different presentations, particularly on soil health and management. Because of these and because of the history that Al mentioned earlier, these are aspects that make me feel that the Black Leg Ranch would be a good option for North Dakota Cowboy Hall of Fame. So thank you for your time, and I think Jerry's going to come up and tell some good stories.
Well, thanks everybody. Excuse me, I'm Jerry Doan, and I got a frog in my throat. But My family and I are the current operators of Black Leg Ranch. The boys would have loved to have been here today, but unfortunately somebody had to stay home and work, and so I got to screw off a little bit. But Shanda's here, and Shanda's running the branded envy booth over on the concourse over there, so many of you know her. But honestly, we're really honored, and I appreciate everybody that we have the opportunity to even stand before you today. You know, through our involvement, and most of you have touched us somehow through our involvement in rodeo and the cattle industry and the buffalo business. And so we really are honored and appreciate those friendships all across this great state. But I'm not up here to pat myself on the back or our generation what we did, but I do want to tell a few stories about the older generations. I mean, we know that when George Doan came here, and I tell this story when I speak across the country, you know, we think it's tough in the cattle industry or agriculture, but I can't imagine what it was like on the northern plains. We've got a picture of the sod house about 1889. He'd already been here a few years, just trying to stay warm and put food on the table. We don't have a frickin' clue about that, do we? You know, and some of you can relate. You know, this is a strong history-minded thing, but it humbles me when we moan about the wind we had the other day was 60 miles an hour, and it was cold and it was tough on livestock and some of us, but nothing like I think back in those days. But I'd really like to relate more about my grandfather who built a lot of the ranch. You know, he bought land for $1 an acre when everybody said it was too high. But the little town of Britton, North Dakota is now a ghost town on the ranch. The only thing left is an elevator there. But it had quite a stockyard. And it had a general store. Lawrence Welk came and played dances there. It was quite a little bustling community. But in those dirty 30s or the tough times, cattle were taken to Britain, and the government was shooting them there. Unfortunately, the local people wanted the meat, and the government wouldn't let anybody have them. It's one of those crazy stories, but shameful. So all those dead cattle were hauled into the sandhills just south of Britain, which is all on our land now, and nobody got to use the meat, but it's quite a story. But it's where my granddad took, and they drove, him and his men, they drove the cattle to Britain. There was a railhead there, and they'd load them on, and he'd actually ride the train to Sioux Falls, or not Sioux Falls, St. Paul and Sioux City to sell these cattle. Well, back in that day, a lot of times things were paid in cash. And he'd come back, and one time, and my dad passed this story down to us, he had $10,000 in cash, and he buried it on the ranch, and nobody ever found it. The sad part was my grandpa had a slight stroke, and I don't know, if he, maybe one of the hired hands knew where it was and dug it up or whatever. So we've always, every once in a while, if somebody's digging the garden up or something, you kind of keep your eyes open. So, it was kind of funny. Another quick story, Stephen, if I start running over, don't hesitate to hook me here. I can go on and on because my grandpa was a crazy guy. Everybody knew him. Even today, he's been gone for 60-some years, and I'll run into somebody somewhere that'll come up and find out your grandson to Jewel Doan, and then they'll tell me stuff. But I'll remember working cows, and my granddad used the JW brand back then, but he also cut the quarter of the ear off every cow we had. And it was his mark. And, it was Hereford country. We had those black cattle. That's why the ranch was named Black Leg Ranch, because it was them black-legged SOBs. People hated those black cattle back then. And, times have changed, obviously. But one day, and I was just a little tyke, and we're sitting at the dinner table, and I'll never forget this story. And there were several cowboys sitting around the table, and they'd been working cattle all morning, and they'd been slicing these ears as they were working cattle. And somebody said, "How many head did we work this morning?" And one cowboy started digging in his pockets, and he laid all them ears out there in the middle of the dinner table. Well, let's see, how many was it? I'll never forget that. It's a cool story and some of the fun of our Western heritage. And then I'd follow up with one last story. My granddad did everything. They had horses, and then they obviously graduated to when tractors and things came, still had horses. But when airplanes came around, he flew everywhere and flew all winter on skis. The roads were poor, and there's so many stories of him in airplanes. And we had the wildest cows in the country, because I always said, well, if you had an airplane over your back 10 feet, you'd be a little nervous too, you know. But I ran into a guy one day, this is just 4 or 5 years ago. Again, he somehow found out I was a grandson to Jewel Doan, and he said, I've got to tell you a story. He said, and if any of you know where Glencoe Church is, right on the Missouri River, south of Bismarck, along 1804. Anyway, he said, I had a flat tire along the road, and I'm sitting there trying to figure out how to change this tire. And he said, all of a sudden, I hear this skull darn airplane. And I'm like, what's that crazy guy doing? And all of a sudden, he's landing in the ditch. And he said, he comes up to me and he says, looks like you got a little trouble. You need a little hand? And so he said he helped me fix that tire, and he's heading back to the airplane. And he said, well, what do I owe you? You don't owe me anything. He said, well, who are you? I'm Jewel Doan. He said, and you know, there's just countless stories about the cattle industry, ranching in those old days, and the strife and things they had to go through. So Steve's starting to edge, and I better get I watched it this morning, so I got you out of the corner of my eye. All I'd like to say is our ranch has got tremendous storied Indian history, cowboy history, and we'd be truly honored to be in the Cowboy Hall of Fame. So thanks so much.